Hi, I'm Kirby Calhoun, and I am one of the field coordinators with Christians United for Israel. The states within my area of responsibility are Florida, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Indiana, South Dakota, Nebraska, and Kansas. I'm going to be going over Lesson 12, a newly forming state. To set the tone for this lesson, let me cite for you a Passover passage called the Vahisha'amda. And this is what the prayer says. And it is this, the Torah, that has stood by our ancestors and for us. For not only one enemy has risen up against us to destroy us, but in every generation they arise to destroy us. But the Holy One, blessed be He, delivers us from their hands. This prayer is woefully prophetic as we look back in history, particularly following the 1948 War for Independence. Israel really didn't get much time to enjoy the victory in defeating 5 armies, all who wanted her complete and utter annihilation. The entire region had been changed dramatically overnight in a war that ended with a humiliating defeat for the Arab nations that lost a war that they provoked. Israel was suddenly in the region as a major player, and that inevitably changed the dynamics of the Middle East. In 1950, Israel passed the Law of Return, formally opening its borders to Jewish immigrants. Nearly 125,000 Jews were airlifted from Iraq to Israel to escape extreme persecution. They were joined by more than 250,000 others from Middle Eastern states like Morocco, Tunisia, Libya, Egypt, and Yemen. Now, considering that nearly 700,000 immigrants were welcomed into Israel after the war, many of whom were survivors of Nazi Germany, Israel's economy initially struggled. Even with mass amounts of immigration, the Jewish people sacrificed so that others would have freedom. Many lived in tent cities, had their clothes rationed, and some were even limited to 1,600 calories a day, so that there would be an ability to feed everyone. Remarkably, within less than 1 decade, Israel's infrastructure developed by providing power plants, roads, highways, and communication systems. And by 1959, they were able to end their austerity program as a free and modern state. Yet, even as Israel worked to secure its future, Egypt vowed to destroy Israel under the leadership of President Gamal Nasser. Nasser unleashed the vicious Fedayeen, one who sacrifices himself, on the Jewish people, civilian facilities, and military facilities with an overall goal of making life untenable in the Jewish state. This version of state-sponsored terrorism was only one act of many that led to the 1956 Sinai-Suez campaign, also known as Israel's Second War for Independence. Nasser understood that the unification of Arabs against the colonial British and French was something that could unify the many Arab nations around Israel. This ideology of pan-Arabism stretched from North Africa to the Persian Gulf, and Nasser sought to be the leader of this movement. To Nasser, Western colonialism was something that must be destroyed, and therefore, he decided to take over the Suez Canal, which at that time was under French and British control. Long story short here is that the European powers, Britain and France, arranged a solution to this problem with Israel, making promises to Israel, and then failed to intervene as promised, essentially giving Israel a unilateral victory over Egypt's occupation of the Suez Canal. At the request of the United States, Israel removed its troops and left the field of battle to return home, ending the war of 1956. Now, as we bring this lesson to a close, we need to touch base again on the topic of this Palestinian identity and how it formed. Many today claim Palestine is linked to the biblical Canaanites and Jebusites trying to supersede Israel's claim as indigenous people of Israel. Of course, we know that even the UN found that this Palestinian national identity is a somewhat recent idea. In fact, a UN Special Committee on Palestine found that it was birthed in direct opposition to the idea of Zionism and British policy in the region. This ideology of pan-Arabism is what really allowed this idea to take root and grow. The catastrophic loss by the 5 surrounding Arab armies, also known as the Nakba, was truly humiliating and lays at the core of Palestinian identity. This military loss defines the Palestinian idea of a national concept and was used to unify many different people. The Arab countries who forced people out of their homes never gave them refuge after losing this conflict. They ostracized them and blamed Israel for their loss, never taking responsibility for their own actions. And by the 1950s, a resistance movement coupled with guerrilla warfare developed under the leadership of an Egyptian engineer named Yasser Arafat. Arafat went on to found Fatah, which sponsored acts of terrorism against innocent Israeli civilians. And by 1959, the Fatah became the largest political faction of the Palestinian Liberation Organization. The Palestinian movement allowed an Egyptian to become the face of its movement, and eventually Arafat would become the chairman of the PLO and the president of the Palestinian National Authority. Thank you for your time.